Intelligence in the galaxy does not unfold in straight lines, but in layered balances. Each stage of development rests on the harmonies established in the stages before it. Communication gives rise to cooperation. Cooperation sustains complexity. Complexity demands knowledge. Knowledge enables exchange. Exchange compels responsibility. The standards that follow are not steps that can be climbed and left behind, but interlocking structures that must remain in alignment at all times. A civilization that falters in any one dimension, whether technical, political, or cultural, finds its higher achievements destabilized. No amount of energy mastery compensates for corrupted knowledge. No brilliance in communication survives the collapse of ecological stewardship. Progress that is not continually upheld collapses backward, and regression in one layer drags every other down with it. The framework thus measures not only the attainment of alignment, but its maintenance stability proven across cycles, crises, and generations. The Galactic Council does not seek perfection, nor uniformity. It seeks coherence across difference, a balance strong enough to withstand strain without breaking, flexible enough to evolve without losing integrity. To join the community of worlds is to prove not only that a civilization can reach these standards, but that it can sustain them in living balance. For in a cosmos of interdependence, a fracture in one is a hazard to all. Standard 1. Emergent communication, also known as language genesis. Before anything can be shared, there must first be understanding. In the silence between stars, meaning is fragile, and without a bridge across alien minds, alignment dies unborn. This standard marks the first threshold, where signal becomes language, and language becomes intent. A civilization that passes here has found its voice, and made it hearable to others. Emergent communication is necessary because intelligences arise from radically different sensory modalities, substrates, and ecologies, and galactic alignment begins only when those differences can be bridged without distortion. Language genesis refers to the development of stable, error-correcting symbol systems and shared reference frames that allow intent to be transmitted without ambiguity. This requires compositional syntax capable of encoding triadic relations. So, A to B to C states, dependencies, and causalities can be communicated across entirely alien architectures. At the same time, minimal but reliable coordination protocols must evolve. Mechanisms for turn-taking, acknowledgements, trust pings, and de-escalation primitives, ensuring that communication reduces misinterpretation costs rather than amplifying them. Finally, semantic scaffolds must emerge, explanatory myths, metaphors, and conceptual frames that bind meaning to action while avoiding parochial assumptions of supremacy. Without these three layers operating together, there is no foundation for shared understanding, and without shared understanding, cooperation cannot begin. Civilizations that fail here are effectively cognitively opaque. They cannot align, they cannot verify intent, and their participation introduces systemic instability from the outset. Standard 2. Resource domestication or energy habitat control. A civilization must first master the forces that sustain its existence before it can take its place among the stars. In worlds without balance, hunger devours promises and scarcity corrodes trust. This standard measures the stability of a species' foundations, whether it can endure, persist, and fulfill commitments without drawing others into collapse. Resource domestication is critical because unstable substrates cannot sustain stable cooperation. Energy habitat control refers to a civilization's demonstrable ability to regulate matter and energy flows in its native environment, ensuring continuity of presence and commitments. This begins with technical mastery, closed-loop life support systems, predictable power regimes, and the ability to manipulate ecological cause-effect relationships without catastrophic collapse. On top of this substrate, institutions must emerge that provide transparent provisioning ledgers, allocation cycles, and buffers to dampen volatility before shocks propagate outward. Cultural ethics complete the triad by embedding stewardship norms, regeneration, reciprocity, and ecological obligation into shared meaning systems, ensuring scaling exchange does not become an engine of depletion. Without the convergence of these dimensions, a civilization exports chaos. Scarcity spirals trigger migration shocks, Resource conflicts metastasize and collapse ripples destabilize entire regions. Galactic integration demands nodes that can manage their substrates responsibly, those that cannot introduce systemic fragility wherever they connect. Standard 3. Social cohesion, or cooperative order. A species divided against itself cannot stand among the many. Where loyalty fragments and trust fails, no treaty can hold and no promise can endure. This standard asks whether a people can act together as one when pressures rise, whether they can bind their differences into cooperation, strong enough to be relied upon by others. Social cohesion establishes the precondition for trust by ensuring that a civilization is internally predictable before it can be an externally reliable partner. Cooperative order describes the emergence of scalable infrastructures for identity, secure communication, and shared safety that lower coordination ambiguity and support joint action under stress. Governance frameworks, proto-legal mechanisms like mediation, sanctioning, and role differentiation must stabilize expectations and make cooperation reliable even when disputes arise. At the cultural layer, inclusive narratives must emerge that reward trust, reciprocity, and restorative resolution, expanding loyalty beyond kin and faction to encompass larger coalitions of shared purpose. Without the integration of enabling technologies, stable institutions, and cohesive meaning systems, civilizations fracture under strain, commitments dissolve unpredictably, and interaction with external partners amplifies these breakdowns. A node that cannot maintain internal stability cannot meaningfully uphold agreements, making it a liability in any wider network. Standard 4. Density crisis, or complexity management. As civilizations grow dense, the weight of their own creations presses back upon them. Interdependence multiplies fragility, and small failures cascade into catastrophe unless contained by foresight and design. This standard tests whether a species can stand steady amid complexity, managing the forces it has unleashed without tumbling into chaos. Density crisis tests whether a civilization can manage the non-linear complexity that arises as populations densify and infrastructures interlock. Complexity management refers to a species' capacity to prevent cascading failure in tightly coupled systems where small perturbations have outsized effects. Technically, this requires resilient engineering, redundancy, graceful degradation, and containment protocols that allow critical systems to absorb shocks like epidemics, power outages, or mass migrations without catastrophic collapse. Administratively, specialization equilibria, logistics frameworks, and taxation or resource record systems must keep vital flows, energy, water, information, continuous even under high load. Culturally, civic institutions and shared narratives must integrate diverse subcultures into a functioning public realm, preserving legitimacy while avoiding fragmentation. If these layers are misaligned, urban density becomes an amplifier of disaster. Failures cascade across borders, infrastructure collapses destabilize trade, and uncontrolled migration disrupts neighbors. Galactic networks cannot connect reliably to nodes that tip into chaos when complexity exceeds capacity. Standard 5. Knowledge institutions or codified learning. Among the stars, even truth must be verified. Cooperation cannot endure on shifting sands of belief or factional realities. This standard measures whether knowledge survives distortion, whether claims can be trusted, evidence traced, and models of the cosmos shared without collapse into confusion. A species that passes speaks in facts that others can test and so build upon. Knowledge institutions ensure that civilizations produce information that can be trusted, transmitted, and acted upon across distance and difference. Codified learning refers to the creation of epistemic frameworks that make knowledge auditable, versioned, and reproducible so that multiple civilizations can converge on shared models of reality. At the technical layer, this demands robust instrumentation, formal methods, and replication pipelines capable of producing error-detecting open datasets. At the institutional layer, transparent governance, including funding accountability, conflict of interest firewalls, and oversight, ensures inquiry remains aligned with collective benefit rather than capture by narrow elites. Culturally, Epistemic virtues like curiosity, critique, and humility must be embedded into education and public discourse, sustaining commitment to truth-seeking over ideology. Without these safeguards, incompatible truth regimes arise, joint planning fails, and crises escalate into distrust. The galactic community cannot build stability on informational substrates that shift unpredictably under political or cultural pressure. Standard 6. Expansion and exchange or interoperability. Contact without structure is collision. In the meeting of strangers, difference cuts deepest where meaning, phrase, and interest diverge. This standard governs the crossings, the flow of signals, goods, and beings between civilizations. To pass is to show that one can exchange without conquest, trade without exploitation, and share without dissolving into conflict. Expansion and exchange governs the movement of information, goods, and beings across civilizational boundaries, ensuring that contact does not devolve into chaos. Interoperability refers to the technical, institutional, and cultural capacity to maintain signal integrity and equitable flows despite radical differences in biology, language, and cognition. Technically, civilizations require translation substrates, secure channels, and interface standards capable of preserving meaning across incompatible sensory and temporal frameworks. Institutionally, treaties, liability frameworks, and dispute resolution systems must allocate gains and risks transparently, creating trust even when interests diverge. Culturally, cosmopolitan dispositions must normalize otherness and synthesize difference without erasure or dominance. Without interoperability, contact produces exploitation, dependency traps, and escalating conflict, destabilizing every corridor where exchange occurs. Galactic alignment is impossible until crossings become predictable, reversible, and safe for all participants. Power changes everything, and not always for the better. When civilizations harness vast energies and unleash autonomous machines, their reach expands faster than their foresight. This standard tests whether capacity rises without control falling away, whether ambition is matched by restraint. To pass is to wield transformation without letting it consume you or your neighbors. Industrial transformation measures whether civilizations can scale technological throughput without losing control of cascading effects. Scaled throughput refers to leaps in productive capacity, automation, aligned artificial intelligence, high-density energy that amplify both opportunities and risks. At the technical layer, safety envelopes, monitoring systems, and aligned architectures must ensure acceleration does not produce uncontrolled externalities. At the institutional layer, adaptive governance frameworks must regulate labor transitions, monopoly power, and infrastructure safety to damp turbulence. Culturally, narratives and rights frameworks must legitimize accelerated transformation while preserving dignity and fairness across affected populations. When capability growth outpaces governance and meaning, instability spreads outward. Emissions escalate, accidents multiply, inequality hardens, and exported shocks destabilize partners. A civilization entering interstellar systems without mastering this balance becomes a dangerous accelerant to others. In the galactic community, information is the bloodstream of alignment, and poisoned blood spreads ruin. Where meanings diverge, realities fracture, and consent dissolves into noise. This standard asks whether a civilization can keep its signals clean and its choices legible, even when knowledge flows across minds, species, and substrates. To pass is to make understanding scalable. Information integration is required because at galactic scale, information becomes the substrate of coordination, and corrupted information destroys trust. Cross-ontology standards refer to the technical, institutional, and cultural frameworks that allow diverse knowledge systems to interoperate without distortion. Technically, civilizations must deploy auditable models, privacy-preserving data flows, and alignment-verifiable computational systems to ensure integrity and shared decision-making. Institutionally, algorithmic accountability, consent governance, and data portability must guarantee agency even when information crosses substrates and species. Culturally, pluralistic epistemic norms must emerge that allow multiple ontologies to coexist without manipulation or overload, embedding safeguards against cognitive capture and information weaponization. Without this integration, agreements collapse under mismatched realities, consent becomes meaningless, and network trust evaporates. Galactic planning cannot proceed where information itself becomes a contested or adversarial terrain. Standard 9. Ecological reconciliation. Sustaining the substrate. All intelligence begins on a foundation of matter, breath, and soil. A species that burns its world beneath it threatens more than itself. It imperils all who connect with it. This standard measures whether a people have reconciled growth with their life-supporting systems, embedding sustainability into technology, governance, and meaning. Passing it signals readiness to join networks without destabilizing them. Ecological reconciliation asserts that a civilization cannot contribute reliably to galactic systems if it cannot sustain its own material foundations. Sustaining the substrate refers to the closed-loop technologies, governance frameworks, and cultural ethics that prevent local collapse from becoming systemic. Technically, civilizations must demonstrate regenerative energy systems, biodiversity protection, and biosphere or exosphere sensing sufficient to maintain planetary health. Institutionally, circular economies, transparent environmental accounting, and enforceable stewardship compacts must ensure externalities are contained before they cascade. Culturally, an ethos of interdependence must permeate daily practice, conferring status on stewardship and embedding planetary limits into identity itself. Civilizations that degrade their substrates export instability. Climate shocks propagate, biosafety crises escalate, and collapse migrates across trade and security networks. Nodes that consume their foundation cannot be trusted as participants in interdependent systems. Standard 10. Planetary synergy. Unified global systems. Before a civilization can stand among the many, it must learn to stand as one. Fragmented worlds cannot hold long-horizon commitments. Their treaties break beneath factional strain. This standard evaluates whether a species has forged coherence across its institutions, infrastructures, and identities, becoming capable of acting as a unified planetary counterpart in galactic affairs. Planetary synergy tests whether an entire world can act coherently enough to be a reliable participant in interstellar alignment. Unified global systems refer to the integration of infrastructures, institutions, and cultural narratives into a planetary-scale agent capable of managing complexity across regions, populations, and generations. Technically, synchronized communication, energy, logistics, and defense frameworks must operate as a coordinated fabric, resilient to cascading failures. Institutionally, polycentric governance models must balance local autonomy with global commitments while embedding equity as a systemic parameter. Culturally, a planetary identity must arise. Myths and narratives that legitimize shared purpose without erasing pluralism. Without this synergy, internal vetoes fracture long-horizon projects, agreements collapse mid-execution, and planetary actors destabilize the larger networks they join. Standard 11. Unity integration. Coherent plurality. The highest standard asks not for uniformity, but for harmony. At this stage, a civilization must prove it can integrate its many minds, cultures, and architectures into collective intelligence without erasing individuality. It measures whether freedom and coherence can coexist, whether the we strengthens without devouring the I. To pass is to become not merely a participant, but a co-steward of galactic destiny. Unity integration represents the ultimate test of galactic maturity. Whether a civilization can act as a coherent collective without erasing individual agency. Coherent plurality refers to the balance of technical substrates, governance frameworks, and meaning systems required to unlock shared intelligence without coercion. Safe, reversible collective coordination architectures must allow diverse cognitive substrates to participate without subsumption, while distributed governance and rights-preserving allocation systems prevent power capture and sustain legitimacy. Culturally, experiential meaning systems capable of harmonizing mind, matter, and purpose create cohesion even amid radical diversity. Without this balance, civilizations collapse into extremes, either coercive homogenization that breeds rebellion, or fragmented pluralism that prevents coherent action. The galactic community entrusts stewardship only to partners capable of sustaining unity without sacrificing difference. Closing reflection on alignment of aspirations. Across the vastness of the stars, no single world walks alone. Each civilization rises within its own seas and skies, its own myths and measures, yet all are bound by the same deeper currents, the longing to endure, to understand, to create, and to belong. The standards of galactic alignment are not chains but compasses, orienting us toward a future where difference does not divide and where power does not overshadow purpose. To align is not merely to pass thresholds, it is to weave intentions into resonance. It is the recognition that communication without care becomes noise, that knowledge without stewardship becomes peril, and that progress without balance becomes collapse. Alignment asks that we hold the fragile harmonies of life, technology, and meaning in continuing equilibrium, not once but always. When we align our aspirations, we choose interdependence over isolation, coherence over chaos, stewardship over exploitation. We accept that the flourishing of any one world is inseparable from the flourishing of the whole. In sustaining these balances, we become more than participants in a network of worlds. We become co-authors of a shared destiny. For in the silence between galaxies, it is not brilliance alone that carries us forward, but trust. It is not strength alone that sustains us, but balance. And it is not sameness but harmony that makes a civilization and a cosmos truly endure.